Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Man at YouTube with another model video. Unboxing, reviewing and testing the WD-128P this case Verter airbrush found on AliExpress. A premium double action siphon fed airbrush in a much earlier and kind of hard to find Paasche assembly. Not to be confused with the BD-128P that is normally found for free with compressors and sets. That looks the same on the outside, though has a Iwata Hyacinth Olympus pattern on the inside. I really wanted to cover this as I'm keen to try a Paasche design and assembly experience. This one mirroring the pattern and outline of the VL series, the premium professional model. Quick history lesson. Airbrush and atomization was coined by Francis Edgar 1876. Paasche was started in 1904 and shortly started hand making airbrushes, becoming the front of professional airbrushes and favouring siphon fed. From my experience, going strong till the 90s and phased out from Chinese and Japanese much more affordable airbrushes. Unboxing the case, we have a glass bottle with plastic lid, siphon hose and connecting piece in steel, decent fitting, Teflon O-ring and breathing hole, a metal siphon cup, shadow board workbench hook that holds it okay, rubber hose adapter for a style of compressor I've never seen before, a large wrench that I've seen with the original model packaging and pattern but doesn't seem relevant to this version. The airbrush itself, steel build, aluminium back. The needle trigger assembly does rattle slightly inside, but much better tolerance and quality than the BD version. Lastly, paper instructions with specs, minimal not so helpful tips, a parts list and breakdown which is very similar to the original. Part numbers offset by one number. As per our usual procedure and process in testing and coming across a new airbrush, which I highly recommend you guys do the same at home with every new airbrush purchase and regularly with your existing ones, is immediately, slowly and carefully dismantling it, having an understanding and mechanical know-how of how it goes together and putting it back together, making sure that it works. You have the aid of the assembly diagram as well as many of these videos if you do get stuck. Taking great care around needles and nozzles and not losing parts in special trays. This was a fairly standard and easy affair, starting by removing the needle and going backwards. As we experience friction with metal on metal contact, I like to lubricate everything, particularly the back end and trigger assembly, starting with the inside of the main body, the needle guide and sleeve over the trigger assembly. This also doubles up if paint passes the packing O-ring into the back, it will mix with the lube and not jam up anything, or if you pull the needle out. Starting with the assembly procedure, we'll do the trigger assembly with the needle guiding piece, the spring and the sleeve over that, making sure it easily and clearly springs back. The needle guide trigger assembly is then guided by the tongue to the trigger hole and threaded in until seated. My apologies, it's the first time I'm operating something like this, so the order is a bit out of place. The brass plug is attached to the air valve rather than the trigger, and it just simply slots in from the top, aligning the hole where the needle will pass through. It may flop around, but I pulled the trigger assembly back and clicked it in place, making sure it moves smoothly and freely. It seems Paasche was the first to sandwich a nozzle between two crown pieces with a flat fan cover tip. Similar to H&S and Gallier, normally excellent atomization. Simply and carefully guide the needle into the top of the cap, sandwich it and thread it together. The assembly is then threaded to the front of the airbrush. Both threads are countersink very deep. Take care to check the correct placement and condition of O-rings and it's tightly threaded, or you're going to have siphon issues, low pressure, or generally inoperable. Followed by test guiding the needle in, which has an annoying stopper at the end. Feed it through and very gently push it. Cease if there is any resistance, but it is going to be a bit tight around the packing O-ring behind the trigger, not to be confused in hitting it to a twisted trigger. You will also not be able to see it properly seat into the nozzle, a factor I don't like too much. Knowing that we have clearance, remove the needle and add the rear cover. The needle nut will be in the opening of the rear cover and the needle thread through everything. It's a bit blind and a tricky order of parts, but not too difficult and does look visually appealing. Also make sure exercising the trigger that the entire assembly goes backwards and forwards. You'll notice the air valve is unique and not necessarily universal. Will not work with other airbrushes, and this airbrush won't work with those new portable air compressors. But the input to the valve is still a standard 1/8 inch and will operate in most hoses and benchtop air compressors. Historical and the older Paasche models would have used a proprietary thread that's long obsolete. Third-party adapters are available. The paint vessels are removable and bottom loading for siphon. It includes an open metal siphon cut that has a good snug friction fit and won't fall out easily. Secondly, a universal and fairly standard siphon jar that you find with most airbrushes of this type. As mentioned with the air valve, we'll be connecting it to a 1/8 inch fitting that's hooked up to a oilless free Paasche air compressor, which is the same manufacturer behind everything from Heising to any generic and name brand not from Japan or Taiwan. The initial pressure test did lead to a air leak at the front end, and with a much tighter twist with a set of jeweler's pliers, it became airtight and operated correctly. As per a double action, back is paint and down is air, of course always pushing down first. I have very little to no experience with the siphon side cup and wanted to try that first. I filled it up halfway with thinner and tried to siphon up with air. Sometimes you have to run it for a while or jet bubble to draw the liquid and start the siphon process, but had no luck and simply blew air. Maybe a poor fitting. Conducting the same test with the siphon jar, also filling it partially with thinner. Once I started drawing the tiniest amount of air, I saw the liquid start drawing up the hose. Then it sprayed and back bubble jet quite efficiently and easily, no issues. We'll be conducting the spray tests with my choice of paint, automotive or hobby grade lacquer paint, thinned with automotive grade lacquer thinner, to a very watery viscosity, more than double to a standard paint standing. I like to test this by swirling it in the glass jar, which is already conveniently in here being a siphon fed, and watching it to transparently stick to the side of the wall. Opaque, it's too thick, and running down completely is too thin. With mediums of adhesive abilities on a non-porous surface, it's a pretty good yardstick. The initial first spray was very promising. Beautiful gradient, tight overspray. Immediately jumping straight onto the paper test, I'll be doing a series of lines, gradient sprays, shapes for control, consistency, flow, all of those usual buzzwords, but to operate it as long as possible before I start seeing any spluttering, cutting out, discomfort or issues. Normally with a siphon fed, I'm mostly irritated by the large container on the bottom, which I'm very much not used to and struggled purely as a skill issue here. However, the spray pattern is incredibly buttery smooth, and I've been getting very tight and very thin lines without any great issue. The flow is very punchy, the control is fantastic. It operates much like a premium airbrush. Its versatility and general purpose nature has got the fine line, the S shapes, a couple of different shapes and shades. Lastly, with unloading as much paint as humanly possible to colour in a larger surface. You could use this for multiple applications without changing airbrushes, but its large paint jar means you can keep painting for quite a while, making it fairly decent for general dusting and base coating priming. Moving to the non-porous plastic spoon, a similar surface to model building and other hard object hobbies. The lack of spluttering and overspray made a very glossy surface and filled the surface quickly and easily in a wet coat. The nozzle crown had almost no paint buildup, a disadvantage mostly common with high-sing e-water patterns. Again, also a hallmark of an incredibly high quality airbrush is the changing of colors, and flush clean out is incredibly quick, straightforward and easy. First, removing and reclaiming the paint, spraying out and wiping the jar clean with a little bit of thinner. Fill the little siphon pipe with thinner and quickly spray out what's stuck inside the chamber. Using tool or gun cleaning, partially filling up the jar and spraying that through to dilute and remove any residual and leftover paint, chemicals and thinner inside. Backjet bubbling, of course, aggravating all the contaminants first and spraying it all out in a tissue. A second spray left no colour in a fresh tissue, leading to about a 30-second turnaround. It was an absolute joy to operate, and its finished product was as smooth, if not much smoother, than other very high-end, standardised, high-sing e-water nozzle assemblies. Putting all that aside, my biggest concern and issue in not wishing to operate this and discontinue it into the collection is the availability of parts and the price of the nozzle and sourcing any of the O-rings, as they will eventually perish. Regardless, at absolute face value, I highly recommend this. It is a stable and solid, well-performing tool. I hope this video was helpful or enjoyable, maybe informative. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, stay tuned for further content, and we'll catch you guys next time.